So today we will start where we left in the last class. So we were discussing about teleology, so influence of teleological way of thinking and how natural law was conceptualized by the Greek philosophers. For us, the most important thinker would be Aristotle, but at the same time, we cannot ignore Socrates or Plato and their contributions, as well as of certain other philosophers before Socrates. But before because of the shortage of time here, we cannot go into their works. So if you guys are interested, you guys can always read about Heraclitus and Parmenides. All those are also good thinkers to read. And as I told you, so because of paucity of time, we will focus essentially on two thinkers, Plato and more importantly, Aristotle and his distinction between natural justice and legal justice. So yeah, in the last class we discussed about two different ways of thinking. One is the naturalistic way, and the other the teleological way. If you guys went back and read this portion, and also if you guys Googled, you would have seen the importance of teleological ways of thinking. I mean, every day, day-to-day life conversation as well, we use teleological reasoning without even knowing, consciously knowing that you are employing teleological reasoning. Now, I tried to explain this thing to you based on this, that teleological way of thinking, essentially means that there is a higher purpose in things. Okay, now this purpose, this purpose or nature that they are referring to is not just confined to human nature. Okay, it's also nature of an object like this. Okay, so everything has a nature, innate nature of its own. Okay, it could be internal as well as external. We will discuss that. So what will be the right thing to do to simplify the thing, to get as close to the nature of things as possible. The purpose to do things that you were meant to do, to live according to the purpose that you have. Okay, so that purpose is not something that you decide for yourself. It is just decided by nature, and hence the idea of natural law, that you derive that purpose from the nature itself. Okay, and quite contrary to this, you have another way of thinking, that is the naturalistic way of thinking, that says that there is no innate nature of things, there is no grand design, there is no plan or purpose. Okay, everything is accidental. Okay, there is no nature in itself does not decide the course that will be taken by things. It is unknowable, it's uncharted course, as has been referred to there. Okay, so these are the two different ways of thinking. We even took up certain examples. Okay, so a quick recapitulation of the kind of examples that we took. So for example, it's in the nature of a coconut, okay, to grow into a coconut tree. You will not get a mango tree out of coconut. Okay, so what would the teleologists say? They will say that it's in the nature of the coconut tree to eventually become a coconut to eventually become a coconut tree. So you understand, I hope. So that's the kind of nature that they were referring to. Now, let's assume that coconut is a physical thing, so it's in the nature of a coconut, to become a coconut tree. What about humans? Can we say that we also possess certain innate nature? Yes, that's the peculiar way of thinking of the teleologists. Okay, so you will see another additional information I want to give you guys is that so of the hard sciences, okay, physics, chemistry, and other subjects, okay, of that. So physics and chemistry, essentially, doesn't apply teleological, you know, way of reasoning, teleological thinking. But biology, when it tries to explain things, okay, biology, when it tries to explain things, okay, they employ teleological sort of reasoning, okay. That, however, does not mean that, biologists believe in the idea of having grand design purpose or something. But for instant explanation of things. So, for example, why do I have eyes? So that I can see. Why do I have, hands? So that I can catch. Why do I have legs? So that I can walk or run. Okay. So if you are making sentences of this sort, you are giving purpose to certain, organs of my body. Okay. So you can extend it to plants. So for example, you may say that, I mean, why do, leaves spread so that, it can catch as much light as possible? Okay. So you can say things like that. Why do fish have fins? Okay. Or tails, so to propel and, direct them in the, why do they have streamlined bodies? Okay. So that they can swim fast in the water. If your sentence construction is of this sort, you are ascribing purpose to different parts or organs of body. So, heart has the purpose of pumping blood. Okay, lungs has the purpose of, uh, what should I say? Taking in, inhaling and exhaling, air. So yeah, nose is basically the cavity. So essentially, you see the kind of sentences that I was making here says that, every organ of your body, every other thing has a specific purpose. So these are the kind of, sentences you see being used by biologists. But don't misunderstand me. Okay, they don't necessarily say. Maybe some of them say, but most of them don't necessarily. Or it's not innate concept of how, doing such science that, that it means that, there is a teleology, in the sense that there is a purpose behind a particular design. No, that's not the case. Okay, what I'm essentially saying here is that even when they use sentences which seem to convey some teleological, reasoning, but they have a scientific explanation for that. Okay, they do not believe that, okay, there is a grand design behind, what I look like, or what any other trees or animals look like. Not necessarily. So as you know, if you have heard about Darwin, then he will talk about theory of natural selection, isn't it? So you have minor, mutations, that happen at genetic level, that manifests at macroscopic level. So there are some mutations which are helpful, certain others which are not helpful, for your survival, suitability in a particular environment. So some designs survive, other designs don't survive, and what you have today is the one that survives. So hence the idea of survival of the fittest. Of course, fittest is not to be taken as the physically fittest, or being athletic and all that. So basically fit according to the environment. So you have scientific explanation even in biology, even when they use teleological sentence construction. So don't misunderstand me. I'm venturing off a little bit. It's essentially to tell you guys that in biology, considered as soft science, even there, it's not that, even though they use teleological sentence construction, does not mean that they believe in grand design purpose, or, something like that, that God has designed my hands so that I can catch, nothing like that. Yeah, that doesn't mean that, some of the biologists, okay, are not believer in, creation theory. That's not the case either. So anyway, so this is what teleological approach is all about. Okay, everything has an innate purpose, and things try to, if it were physical thing, then they will also try to fulfill that purpose. And if it is us, the humans, then we ought to achieve, live for that purpose for which we exist. Okay, so this is what teleological thinking is all about. Okay, now teleological thinking was not just, what you see with the Greeks. This has become this was taken up by the the religious natural law thinker, especially Thomas Aquinas. Okay, he also took it up. The difference here is that, unlike the other teleologists, Aquinas said that, okay, the purpose essentially comes from God. Okay, if the purpose is not without an author, so there has to, if there is a author, if there is a design, then there has to be someone who designed. Okay, so that's his idea. So if you come across a very complex, you know, watch, okay, then someone must have built that watch. It can't be like accidentally there. So in a similar, sort of reasoning, he says that if there are purpose, then the purpose must have been given by someone. So, but apart from that, he's also a teleologist as much, okay, in the sense that there's a quotation given in the reading that I sent you where he says, "Every agent acts for an end." Okay, so end here means purpose. Okay, so every agent acts for an end. Otherwise, one thing would not follow more than another from the action of the agent. Okay, unless it were by chance. By chance. So what he's essentially saying here is that you don't see complete chaos in the world. We see something happening, if something else happens. So he's saying that there has to be a purposive reasoning, a purposive, there has to be a purpose behind that. Okay, this is, things are not just random. Things are not there just by chance. Okay, there has to be a purpose. This is what he's saying. Okay, so if your thinking way of thinking is like that, you are teleological thinker. So for example, when we talk about meritocracy, okay, so this is as much in existence today. Why is that the case? So for example, you guys appear in the CLAT exam, okay, to go to national law universities, the best law schools, okay, best law schools. To be able to go there, you have to clear this examination. So what does this examination determine? Okay, apart from all other reasoning that you can provide, one of them would be definitely this, that it finds out who's best suited to belong to those law schools. Okay, so whether you have the capacity to be in those law schools. Okay, so it finds out whether you have that that merit in you. Okay, so it finds out whether you meant for the law school, whether you have the quality of being there in a law school. Okay, so if that is the kind of reasoning we have, okay, so then we find that, okay, then we are basically employing teleological reasoning here. Only those who are meant to study law, that we find out through CLAT exam, okay, will go and study CLAT examination. Okay, so meritocracy is a kind of meritocracy in its different manifestations. Okay, they have different forms, and the different manifestations are kind of teleological reasoning. I will explain this later on with another interesting example. Okay, but for now, are you guys like following me? Am I making sense? Okay then. Okay. Yes, that's teleological, reasoning. Okay. So another example has been given here to distinguish between teleological thinking of Aristotle and then Lucretia's naturalistic reasoning. So you might have seen this already, but what the difference you can observe here. So Aristotle in the Partibus Animalium, okay, on the parts of animal, he says, nature makes the organs to suit the work that they have to do, not the work to suit the organ, okay. Whereas Lucretia says in De Rerum Natura, on the nature of natural things, since nothing at all was born in the body that we might be able to use it, but what is born creates its own use. Let's take the example of heart, okay? Just so that you guys are clear with this reasoning, because my students stay confused, even me explaining this thing, many number of times, even after I explain this thing many number of times. So understand this thing with the example of a heart, the human heart, okay? So I can ask you this, okay? What is the purpose of human heart, okay? What is the purpose of human heart? Your answer would be, it will be to pump blood, okay? Simplify the reasoning. I'm not going into the detailed function, okay? But your answer will be to pump, blood into like different extremes of human body. So what was my question? My question was, what is the purpose of human heart? Okay, so that's a teleological question, type of question I asked. So biologists quite often use that. What is the purpose of nose? Okay, what is the purpose of long neck in giraffe? Okay, or what is the purpose of those, what do you call it, striped black and white marks on zebra? Okay, so you ask questions of that sort. That's a teleological sort of question. And the answer which is given. So purpose of a long neck of giraffe, so that is that is so that they can eat vegetation from taller trees. Okay, you can say that. You can say that blood pumps blood. Okay, so the purpose of heart is heart pumps blood. So the purpose of heart is to pump blood. So see, here we are saying that, for a purpose that is of that of pumping blood, heart was created. Now you'll ask, who created heart? No answer. Then you'll say that, okay, it must have been created by someone. Either you know or you don't know. Okay, then your answer will not be that I was born. Then ultimately someone can say that who designed the idea of heart. Okay, so don't go into all that. So essentially what I'm saying is that one will say that, okay, heart pumps blood. Okay, but I'm saying that what is the purpose of heart? It pumps blood. Okay, so purpose was given by someone. Okay, so it must have a creator. So reasoning of that sort are teleological. On the other hand, someone might say that, well, this is an organ, okay, which evolved over a long period of time and thus acquired that specific function. So in like if you were to go back by millions of years, maybe even billions of years, whatever living creatures existed back then may not have a heart. Okay, they might have a completely different way of circulating matters in their body. Okay. Mm, but then in the course of time something of the sort that we call heart had evolved. Okay, so it was not designed, but it's the best mechanism of supplying blood around your body. So this is something that has naturally evolved over a long period of time. So that's how you have two different kinds of reasoning. The first kind was given by Aristotle here, and the second was by Lucretia, who says that since nothing at all was born in the body, that we might be able to use it. So if we apply it to our heart, you'll say that, okay, our heart is not there so that it is able to pump blood. Okay, you'll say that, but what is born creates its own use. So heart has evolved over a long period of time, and now it pumps blood. So its purpose is not to pump blood, but that's how it has evolved, and it pumps blood. So that's the two different kinds of reasoning. Okay, so I hope you guys understood the teleological way of reasoning. Okay. So yes, and then they proceed on to finding two different kinds of teleological, two different kinds of purpose. Okay, there are external purpose, and then there are internal purpose. Okay, well, it's quite self-explanatory. External purpose is basically tells you about the dependency of one over the other, whereas internal purpose refers to the object in itself, in a you know so what is the difference? So one object, okay, externally one object might serve the purpose of another. Okay, so for example, rain falls so that grass can grow. Okay, so rain falls for the purpose what? So that the grass can grow. Okay, so yes, that's the soil and water allow grass to grow. So whatever it is, okay, it's like that. Okay. Mm, so what it involves two different objects, rain or water or soil, whatever, so that grass grows. So one fulfills the purpose of another. So that's external, you know, aspect of that purpose. Whereas there is another internal aspect of the purpose that they identify. So, for example, I told you that a coconut will grow into a coconut tree, a mango will grow into a mango tree. Okay. So those are essentially internal aspect of the purpose. Okay, here. So many examples have been given here as well. A tree will grow roots, branches, leaves. Lion will learn to roar, be brave, hunt, etc., etc. So everything has a innate nature. Okay. So it doesn't just apply to other animals. It applies to us as well. So other examples like traders will trade fairly, that they won't cheat you. So if this sells, sell you half kg, if this profess to sell you half kg, they sell you half kg. So yeah, so what is being said here is that it is the purpose. Okay, so rulers will rule, not just rule, but rule justly, because that's their purpose. Okay, so these are some of the examples of teleological way of thinking. But here's the difference that you will see when teleological reasoning is applied to other objects and certain humans and certain other objects. Okay, so for example, a coconut will inevitably grow into being a coconut tree. Okay, but a ruler may not necessarily be just. A ruler could be unjust. Okay, says that even a tiger or a lion could be timid and not necessarily brave. Okay, so every time, okay, something does not fulfill the purpose it is meant to, okay, nature will put things back into course. Okay, so what is being said here is very essential. So we all ought to act according to the purpose for which we exist. If we deviate from it, then we are going against the nature, and that is not acceptable. That is what is being said here. So if you are a ruler, then you ought to rule justly according to them. But they're not giving us the answer to what is the question of what is ruling. What does it mean to rule justly? They are not even giving those answers here. So what they are essentially saying until now is that one ought to act according to their nature. Okay, you ought not to go against the nature. So I will give you an example, okay, of something that is teleological reasoning. Okay, so when section 377 of IPC says offenses against the order of nature. Okay, uh, what kind of reasoning do you see there? Offenses against the order of nature. Are you listening to me? Am I audible? I'm asking you guys a question. So my question is, section 377, although not, I mean, of course, not after all the judgments. Okay, so section 377. Okay, what does it say? It's considered as unnatural offenses. Okay, offenses against the order of nature. Okay, so what kind of reasoning do you see in that provision of law? Naturalistic or teleological? No, Sumit, don't go into that question. We are not going into moral, rightness or wrongness, because we do not have the yardstick. So, no, don't go into theology. Don't go into theology. When it says unnatural offense, okay, section 377 says unnatural offense, okay, what do you see from those two words? Of course, theological aspect is there, but I'm not going into that yet. The theological explanation is based on the teleological reasoning. So here what you see is a kind of teleological, reasoning. Okay, unnatural offenses. Okay, so it says whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature. So you see, against the order of nature. So you are doing something that you are not meant to. Nature does not say that men have intercourse with man, or men have intercourse with animal, or women have intercourse with women. Okay, so it says whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punished with imprisonment, and blah 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 blah. Rest doesn't matter much to us. So what you see here is that it says that what is being punished, what is being made uh, punishable here is an act which is against the order of nature. Okay, so nature, according to this particular provision, says that they're not saying that because in nature you also find homosexual animals, huh? You see lion like mating with another, one male lion mating with what do you call it, lion and lioness. So yeah, one lion mating with another lion, you see that. Okay, you even see insects of same sex mating with another. So, so there is a flaw in that as well. So what I'm saying here is that when it says against the order of nature, it essentially says that nature says that um, purpose of mating is to reproduce. Okay, so man on man or women women, reproduction will not fulfill that purpose, and hence it is against the order of nature. So that's what we call as teleological reasoning. Okay, did you guys understand why it is teleological reasoning here? And of course it is theological as well, I'll come to that. But theology got their inspiration, justification from teleological reasoning. Did I make sense? If you guys disagree, you guys can disagree, you guys can say that maybe it is naturalistic, but then you have to tell me why or why not. So you agree that this is teleological reasoning, isn't it? So quite often, if some reasoning of this sort would say that, okay, so here what will they say? Okay, no incest here. I'm not going into incest. Okay, so for example, incest will also be. See, incest could have many different explanations. So you can say that when it comes to incest, it's bad because it is against the order of nature. One could say that. Okay, one could say that. Okay, but then in nature we see incest happening. Okay, but we see that teleological reasoning is not based on observing the nature. Okay, it's not based on observing the nature. They will say that it is still wrong because it is going against the nature, against the order of the nature. But then incest can also be said wrong for another naturalistic reason. Okay, that is that inbreeding is never good for us. Okay, it leads to certain horrible outcomes. So for that reason also you can criticize incest. But anyway, I'm not going into all those questions for now. Just bear with me with this question, this thing that you see that there is a distinction between naturalistic and teleological reasoning. And teleological reasoning is quite clear. Okay, they say that you ought not to go against the order of nature. Okay, so it applies to physical objects. Of course, they inevitably follow, but it applies. But it becomes applicable in a different way to us and other animals as well. Okay, so when he says that we ought, a ruler ought to rule justly, is saying that okay, there is a perfect good way of ruling, there's a bad way of ruling. Okay, so you ought to rule according to the good way of ruling. Now what is that good way of ruling? We will come to that later on, but for now bear with me. So why should we, your next question will be, why should a ruler rule justly? So what they say is that there will be certain consequences if they don't. Okay, so an example given here is that um, they say that hubris. Okay, an example has been given of hubris. Okay, so what they're saying is that essentially if you do not act in accordance with nature, then nature will put you back in your place. So if a ruler doesn't rule justly, then he or she is hubristic. Okay, and nature will put you back in your place. Okay, so a ruler should not become what do you call, you know should not become unjust. I'm not using other words like autocracy and all, because today autocracy has a different meaning, and back then autocracy would have a complete different meaning. So I'm not using those words. So what is being said here is that you should rule justly and not unjustly. You should not be arrogant. Okay, when you are arrogant, then you go against the order of nature. You believe that you can change the nature. You can go against the God's uh, you know how God wanted the world to function. Okay, You cannot go against that. If you go against that, then nature, or you can replace that with God if you want to, in certain other cases, will put you back in place. An example was given of this Persian king of King Xerxes. Okay, if you have seen that movie 300, you must have seen. Okay, what happened? So Xerxes, he tries to, in the first, not in the first battle, in the second battle in that movie. So that's the one I think they're referring to here. Okay, so he wants to subjugate all of Greece. Okay, so he has to go across the sea. So the narrowest point was at Hellespont. Okay, and he thought, okay, he could go across that, narrow point by, building a bridge, using a large number of ships. Okay, so and then while he tries to do so, his entire, naval fleet is like, not entire, partly destroyed by storms. Okay, and then he subsequently is, he loses in the battle as well. So this is silly though. But what is being said here is that do not do things against the order of nature. Otherwise, you will be put back in your place. Now, see, whether you agree with the kind of, reasoning that is provided here or not, but there could be other reasoning. Okay, it's not necessary that, okay, this also gets me a little confused. Okay, I hope you guys understand. Okay, they have a different way of, understanding back then. Okay, what is that different, way of understanding? It is that, okay, someone is watching over you. Okay, someone, an external agent, whether you give it the form of God or not, but someone is observing you, whether you are acting in accordance with the nature or not. If you don't, then that someone, okay, will put you back in place. So because, Xerxes was being very hubristic, very arrogant, so he was put back in his place by the nature, or you can replace that with God. Okay, so maybe for the Greeks it must have been Zeus or whatever, I don't know, but you understand the kind of reasoning which is provided here. So that's teleological, reasoning. That's teleological reasoning. Now I don't know to what extent karma would be, I don't know. I mean, to how to relate karma with this. Karma is basically, consequentialist in a different sense of the term. That if you do something, then there'll be certain consequences. But when it comes to karma, the consequences are not merely natural consequences. Like, if you are careless, then you might, meet with an accident. It's not like that. Okay, it's also kind of like divinely ordained, in the sense that, if you behave in a certain way, if you live your life in a certain way, maybe in your next life you might be born as a lesser animal. If the reasoning is of that sort, then it seems that there is some kind of, intervention of an external agency. So I don't know how to relate teleology with karma. This is my lack of knowledge about karma rather than about teleology. But if any one of you have more knowledge about what karma essentially is all about, as is understood in our, philosophy, then you guys can definitely relate it with that. So I hope you guys nonetheless understood the concept of teleology, what it essentially means. Are you guys clear with teleology so far? The concept of teleology so far? Okay then. So here's what we take from this entire discussion. It is that teleology is very essential in the in arriving at the idea of natural law for the Greek thinkers. And how do they do so? We will study now. Okay. So that's teleological reasoning for you. Yes, the same kind of teleological, reasoning was essentially applied by all the three thinkers in, Athens. Okay, starting with Socrates, then Plato, then Aristotle. Okay, their philosophy has been based on, this essentially this idea. Okay. Um, so Plato had said that, if you live in harmony with the universal laws, okay, universal laws, uh, that a person can find the state of true happiness or well-being known as eudaimonia. So you are to live in accordance with those universal laws, and if you do, then you will achieve true happiness and well-being, and that's what he calls eudaimonia. So so here's your clue to natural law. Okay, so natural law would be to live, in accordance with these universal higher principles. Okay, that what you ought to do. So that's what natural law is according to them. Okay, so we'll discuss this in greater detail. Okay, so they are saying that there is a higher universal law, and you ought to live in accordance with that, higher natural law, and it is that natural law that gives you purpose. So do not deviate from that purpose, because then you will be violating the natural law, and if you violate the natural law, then nature will put you back in your place. Okay, so that's what natural law essentially meant according to them. However, this idea of natural law, received some kind of a challenge from certain other thinkers. Okay, other contemporaries of Socrates, Plato. Okay, and these are the thinkers, although they disagreed, on many different things. Okay, can be you know called as, grouped as, the Sophists. Okay, Sophists. Okay, so Sophists are the ones that challenged this way of thinking, this teleological way of thinking of these three thinkers, essentially Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. So you will find it in the dialogues between Plato and various other, you know, Sophists of those times. If you guys are interested, I suggested the books. You guys can always go back and read them. Now, who were these Sophists? Okay, these Sophists were no one but, uh, they were basically itinerant teachers. Okay, itinerant or traveling teachers. Okay, they wouldn't teach you for free. Okay, so for example, other thinkers, that we discussed, they would do philosophy for the sake of philosophy. Okay, because they're interested in it. Okay, for the Sophists, okay, they don't believe that your knowledge would come for free. Okay, so they were paid teachers, so they will teach you, they will roam around, they will teach you, and they will charge you for that. Okay, so that's why they were kind of, looked down upon, not by everyone, of course, they were very respected, but by others. For example, Plato didn't have high regard for some of the Sophists, not all of them. Okay, so for the sole reason that, okay, they were criticized as being, sellers, shopkeepers, masquerading as philosophers. So you sell, you do not philosophize. Okay, is the criticism which was, directed at them. So another distinction that you will see between Sophists and the other, Greek thinkers, that is that they were quite, empirical and inductive in their approach. So they wouldn't think of ideas in the vacuum, but they will generate ideas based on observing the world. So they were quite, experiential in their approach. Okay, so that's another distinction between them. Okay, another is that they do not talk about these higher principles. Okay, so because they were essentially teaching some aspirant politicians, okay, those who wanted to be politicians, so they taught them in the art of, just a second, yes, who's there, just a second. Oh, no, no, so yes, sorry about the interruption. So we were discussing about Sophists. Yes, so Sophists basically taught certain aspiring, politicians in the art of rhetoric. Okay, so instead of dealing with the truth as was the, as was being done by others, okay, in the idea of virtue, vice, and all that, so Sophists were very practical in their approach. So if you can influence the people by using a certain rhetoric, then do it. What's wrong with that? There is no question of good or bad in that. Okay. So that's why, they do not, as of now or earlier as well, had the same kind of regard as was, given to the other philosophers. Okay, because of this particular, mm, approach that they had. Okay, so today you might come across this word called, sophistry. Okay, sophistry means what? Someone who is specious in their, reasoning. You use false, superficial reasoning or deceptive reasoning. Okay, to convince someone to win in an argument, but in reality that's not the case. Okay, so if someone does something like that, for example, most politicians today are, said to employ sophistry. Okay, so they lie, they use, rhetorics. Okay, this, that, 5 trillion economy, or 15 lakh in your account, something like that, or politicians do that. Okay, and so these philosophers back in those times, see, it has always been like this. Okay, so these philosophers back in those times would teach these philosophers in the art of rhetoric, as to use all these, narratives to influence people. Okay, so some of them knew that religion is useless. Okay, it's of no use, it's probably not even real, but they said that, well, if politician can use it to influence and control people, for the sake of power, then what is wrong in it? There is no question of rightness or wrongness in it. Okay, so use it, even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in particular religious, view. There is no harm if you use it to, influence people and stay in power. So you see the difference in the way of thinking between sophists on the one hand and the mm, other thinkers on the other. But then I drew a poor picture, bad picture of them in your mind. In the sense, bad in the sense, see, when I say bad, I need some kind of parameter. But then you already probably made up your mind about them, that they were probably not true philosophers. Probably other three were true philosophers. Okay, but then that's not the case. Okay, the thing is that these are the people. Okay, these are the thinkers. Okay, who challenge the natural law or teleological thinking of the of Plato and Aristotle. They are the one who challenged them. Now, their challenging them is very important. Okay, why is that important? Because Aristotle and Plato quite often will use their natural law, idea of natural law, to justify the laws of the polis, the city states. Okay, and hence, even though those laws of the polis treated different people differently, for example, slaves were mistreated, women were differently treated. Okay, they justified that, saying that this is the order of nature, this is how things are meant to be. Okay, but then sophists were the one who challenged them and criticized them. So, they also distinguished between citizens and outsiders. So quite often, these sophists were also not citizens of that place. They were traveling teachers. So they questioned this different, treatment between the citizens and outsiders. So they're saying that what you consider as natural, universal, is not really natural and universal. So we are just telling that to you. Now, here's the problem with studying the sophists, because sophists do not have one uniform way of thinking. Because if they do, they are no longer sophists. Okay, because they do not have any one principle they believe in. So you have others. So, for example, Stoics that we will